get a super round of applause for everyone who's made it to the panel today. And I'm so happy the panel is not a manual. So we have fantastic women in all of their diversity, including me, who are not HR heads, who are not inclusion heads, but the culture custodians of a corporate. And we speak to you today in that capacity. So for me, when I look at diversity and inclusion, believe me, I started off my career with the Humsafar Trust in 1999. So about 23 years ago, I started off as a outreach worker distributing condoms and health material at a truck terminal. So from a 2,300 rupees salary to leading inclusion and diversity and being the culture head of a leading alcohol brand in India, I feel that journey itself is about diversity and inclusion. And I want to thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to be able to add my voice and opinion to this wonderful panel. So for me, when I talk about inclusion, I'm not talking about diversity because nature by design is diverse. We can't have a non-diverse nature. So for me, it's an integral part of any healthy organization. And I literally mean healthy organizations because organizations can be healthy, can be dying. But if you want a vibrant, thriving organization, a healthy organization, DNI is a central piece to that. In fact, I no longer look at myself in the role that I play as support services or HR services. We are in the business of making the business do better. So for me, it's a proven fact that with a diverse and inclusive work practices, organizations tend to perform better. And for me, when it comes to organizations who can come forward, support people of diverse backgrounds within their organization, so diversity based on age, on ability, orientation, geography, gender identity and expression, so on and so forth. It's only something that will help the organization grow over a period of time. And to unshamedly talking about my experience, I came from public policy background. I worked with the UN for 11 years and I took the jump into a neo-capitalistic world. I never thought I would be walking around in stilettos on those super marble flooring, but I did take the jump. And I never thought I would be able to create that impact, but now that I sit back and look at the last 5 to 6 years of my journey leading inclusion in the industry, I want to basically look at what the top leadership of all of these firms who are on this panel will be talking about from their understanding about inclusion and diversity, conscious inclusion, and I'll come to that term slightly later. How would you define conscious inclusion for all? Like, I have basically talked about conscious inclusion, just not about diversity and inclusion or dishonest diversity. I think I came up with this, I read about this term somewhere, dishonest diversity, and it hit me like a roadblock. So to counter dishonest diversity, we are talking about very conscious inclusion. What is the practices, whether they are emerging, good or best practice? And I see KASHISH Film Festival and some of the corporate sponsors coming from extremely varied background. I didn't know what an FMCG, a finance BFSI group, a content creation group, and an alcohol organization could have anything in common apart from conscious inclusion. And thanks to the wonderful angel partners who've gone beyond their scope to make a point that if organizations really put their heart, their mind, and of course their money, events like these are possible. So the first question is, when you look at the term conscious inclusion and good and emerging practices, what is it that we need to adapt, bring forward, and really need to scale up over a period of time?
Thank you so much. The advantage of going first is that I can say whatever I want and then they have to add to it. So, and I'm sure you'll flip the script for the second question. Conscious inclusion, I'm allowed to use one corporate-ish term at least?
Yes.
It's not?
We'll check for that later.
Okay, fine. I just want to say that in Morgan Stanley, we think a lot about diversity, inclusion, and now adding the new term belonging. Okay, that's it for the day. So belonging is what we like to talk about. And I think the way I've heard somebody describe it is beautiful. Inclusion means it is someone's room and you are invited to that room. Belonging is when you feel that's your room. Nobody has to invite you to it. And so I think that's the point we try to make at Morgan Stanley. It's not about there is somebody sitting with a big key that says, come on in now, you're allowed to attend this. This is for you. This place is for you. It's not something that we are asking you to join. So I think with that in mind, now are we there? Let me just say no, we aren't there. But that is our vision, and that is the horizon, shall I say, that we are aiming towards. Look at my background, okay? I think most people would say, why aren't you a pianist? There's no money in that, that's why. And why, and what, I mean, biochemistry, do you ever use it in your day job? No. But I think that's the point. It is the question of, I am an amalgamation of all my experiences, whatever they may be, as is everybody else. And that is diversity, right? I think everybody brings their own experience to the roles and the jobs that they do. And our role as an organization is to make sure that the environment facilitates that. So we focus a lot on the environment because there is a very fine line between measuring what's diverse and discriminating. Why do you want to know my gender? Why do you want to know my identity? It shouldn't matter, and it shouldn't in an ideal world. So for us, it is less about where, who, what, and how different you are, but more about this environment should be able to welcome anyone, no matter what their background orientation. I mean, all of those things are just markers. They don't talk about the value that an individual can bring to the team. So I've stayed very far from corporate lingo, but the bottom line is making the environment as inclusive as possible. So most of our efforts are about creating awareness about unconscious bias that we all have, creating a safe space to admit, hey, you know what, I did this thing and I don't think it was right. It's about creating the safe space even for the so-called majority, right? To feel that they can make the mistake and they can learn from it. Because we all make mistakes in this world when it comes to inclusion, because we're hardwired to do so. So we focus a lot about creating awareness. We focus a lot about being out there wherever we go. Whether people in this audience join us or no is not how we measure the success of partnering with KASHISH. For us, it's about making a statement that anyone and everyone is free to join our firm and thrive at our firm.
Thank you. That was really touching, Avril. In fact, there are, and this is just something that came to my mind when you said, you know, it's the room and being invited and the sense of belonging. So thank you for not putting that analogy about, you know, being invited to the party and being asked to dance. What if I choose not to dance? Yeah. And the guest should be perfectly fine with my choice of not being wanting to dance or to dance with two left foot or whatever. Thank you so much for that extremely simple and very lucid description about the sense of creation of belonging. Thank you. Minal, over to you.
Yeah, I think many points that Avril touched, I will not get into that. But I'll get started with one of the things that my leader spoke yesterday is thank you for having us at KASHISH. And that is the tone that we are setting. You know, you made a very valid point, Zainab, that we are not really close to films per se, but we make food. We are close to everybody. So a food company not thinking about humans as humans, I think it's a mismatch. So I come from an organization where the culture of the organization is very strong. And we said that, hey, we need to get formal around some of our efforts. And we really started looking around, and trust me, there were so many things that we were probably already doing. And to build up on what Avril said, I'll tell you one of the practice that we follow to consciously be inclusive. There is something called as inclusion contact, okay? And the way I will explain is, in a corporate, there are many meetings. Whenever we are starting a meeting, we try to start that meeting with up to 1 minute of a inclusion video, message, conversation that we put up, and we take 30 seconds to discuss about it. What it does is, so imagine there are so many corporates that they are working on this journey of bringing inclusion in their offices and in their workplaces. We pick those elements up and we talk about it to see how we can continue to learn. And that's such a strong practice because it not only helps people to open the windows, I call it opening the window in the mind whenever you are in this discussion, but I also think it helps you to cut down on that bias that somebody may have. So it has to start somewhere. The second thing that comes to my mind is definitely there have to be very clear goals somehow set up. And goals is a very corporate-y, word. But when I say goal, I'm talking about how will I bring a difference. That's exactly what we are trying to do. We try to build our education and awareness campaigns, to Avril's point, to bring more and more people up to speed. See, in an office, people are coming and going, And at that point of time, if the new folks who are coming into the office are not brought up to speed on what's really happening, they will not know. The second place that we try to work a lot is my leaders. So how do we build their capability around this? And how do we try to bring them up because they are your first point of contact? So I would say that these are some of the practices that we follow. We are very glad to be associated with KASHISH Forum per se. I don't really know what General Mills will do in filmmaking, but definitely we bring food and we bring happiness. So thank you.
Thank you, Minal. I think I must commend you for saying that we need to build capacity of the leaders. I think the frank admission that leaders need to be handheld, need to be taught, need to be tutored, and when necessarily arm-twisted to bring inclusion into action. So thank you. And I really like that point about the inclusion contact. That's a great learning to be able to dedicate a very small fraction of time to make some conscious effort at beginning with I. Archana.
Okay, so I'm going to try and see if I can do this differently. When we started on our journey, which was about 3 years ago, I think our stated intent was about creating an environment much like what Avril was saying, where people can bring their real, authentic selves to work every single day. Now, we were very sure that on a whiteboard, that sounds really nice, but how do we really make that come alive, right? And when we started on the sensitization and awareness journey, I realized that a lot of us ourselves had so much to learn. So the more we started interacting with, with diverse groups, the more we were able to understand what does it really mean to be part of a minority group, and how does that feel really, We're a content company. One would imagine that for us, being diverse, and everybody has this so-called image and this thing about, oh, there are all kinds of people and everybody is welcome. But there are a lot of biases that exist within this industry as well. So, and while our content creators are very aware, you still need to sort of just keep reminding them and making sure that they continue to stay inclusive in the content that we put out. Look, we're the biggest platform, right? I mean, we have the largest reach as far as television is concerned, as far as OTT is concerned. Very mindful about the influence that we actually carry and the power of our storytelling. So, whether it's working with our internal people or with our external partner vendors, we're constantly trying to make sure that we're staying, we're putting out meaningful stories that even, our viewers in tier 2, tier 3 cities are able to at least understand, very closed minds, and the audience there is still a journey for the country and our society at large to walk. And if you want to stay profitable and you want to still make sure that you're putting out the right messages, you need to walk a very fine line between being very, very mindful. So we're on that journey right now, honestly. But we're consciously now making those efforts to not just talk about women empowerment stories, because that's we've been doing from times 1991 when we started with the Saas Bahu stories. But I feel that even across the LGBTQI plus community and the other dimensions of diversity, we're really very mindfully, very thoughtfully going with our storylines right now. Internally, and you were talking about leaders, we've set up these employee resource groups, which I'm sure all organizations do. What's helped us in this journey is the fact that a lot of our content leaders actually agreed to become leaders of these business employee resource groups. And they, I've just seen such a shift in how they are approaching all these conversations, all these stories now. There is a lot of, we had a trans woman on Big Boss in one of our shows. She made it all the way up to the final round. These are small things, but these are the things that I think will make a difference towards really changing internally and externally the narrative around building inclusion and conscious inclusion.
Thank you, Archana. I think you made a very valid point in terms of being very conscious about the messaging and the stereotypes, and that's apparent with the kind of content that you're putting out. I'm going to take a little shift from this, and I'm going to start in reverse order from you and then come down to Avril. And not wanting to put you into a spot, but we've always, when we talk about communities, whether it's gender or ability or LGBTIQ people, we always talk about microaggressions and biases and stigma. And I wanted to do a small detour from that, because all of that is available on the screens. All of that is, I don't know whether you all came in when the last movie was being screened, and when the movie trailed off, there was this last very emotive scene between the two women protagonists of that film. And what is extremely interesting is that the audience was hooting through and was absolutely so jubilant. So we know microaggressions, we know stigma. And for me, but everyone who's born with a brain will have a bias. Yes. But how do we use that brain to create micro affirmations? Another corporate jargon, but just in terms of how do we tackle this entire thing: stigma, willful neglect, outright discrimination, violence. How does one counteract that with micro affirmations? It could be, say, with you in the content that you create, in terms of behaviors, in terms of inclusive food, in terms of product, etc., so on and so forth, in terms of behaviors. But that question is what I would like to ask all of you all, in terms of what could we do in terms of changing some of these stereotypes. And I'll give a very small example. I come from an organization which at one hand says men will be men. And then we also have another brand which talks about absolute allyship. And we were doing a quick gender study, and we pointed out all of that. And very, very simple. If you looked at alcohol ads 10 years ago, all that was there was the body of a sensuous woman, over-sexualized. You would find perhaps a glass with water droplets, just trying to create an artificial sense of sensualization. And you look at what 10 years have done. Today you have an Alia Bhatt, a Priyanka Chopara, all being brand ambassadors, moving from a woman just being there as a prop to actually being able to be a brand ambassador, although they are not seen as basically the main customer segment of that brand. So just in terms of, because for me, I mean, just having another powerful woman lending her voice who may or may not be consuming that product, but being a brand ambassador is in a way microaffirmation. Or look at the Cadbury ad, changing the focus from gender and yet being able to create that kind. So anything that you could share from your personal experiences, but also in, in sync with the content stuff you just mentioned from this.
Yeah. I think portrayal of characters which are diverse, I think just normalizing them as just human beings. And, Minal and I were talking about this just now outside as well. That, and actually Avril just mentioned it, right? It doesn't matter who you are as long as when you come to a place, what is your profession, what are you bringing to the table, what are your skills, what is the mind that you're bringing to the table is very, very important, right? So I think, I'm using a corporate, now that you've made us aware of it. I think normalizing those conversations and just being able to say, yes, I am an executive producer, or I'm an HR professional, or I'm a lawyer. Could be anybody. That's the person that you bring to the workplace, right? And normalizing that and not worried about, oh, how is she dressed, how is he dressed, is one thing that I think is very critical. Starting to have those conversations and normalizing them. Mental wellness, for instance, right? Nobody really talks about it, but creating the safe space or the space or the environment where it's okay to say I'm having a bad day. I think that normalizing, and the second very, very powerful, and words are so powerful, right? I think providing people with the right vocabulary to either, to either stand up for whether you're the one who's being wronged or you're watching somebody being wronged. I think those are very, very critical micro affirmations that we can create. From an organization, internal things, and I'll tell you the smallest thing, right? Yesterday I was listening to a lot of the people coming on stage and talking about policies, etc. We have all of them in place, right? Whether it's same-sex partners, self-insurance, gender affirmation surgeries covered, etc., etc. But the fact is that people still are not feeling safe enough to come out and use those ones. So how do I do that? We've started a small group. We have a couple of out and proud colleagues. We've actually just asked them to reach out to members of the community who don't want to be out at work maybe, and start those conversations and try to see if those will help somebody feel better. We have a lot of young parents, and I've actually heard so many come back to me and say that after they've been through some of these sessions around rainbow parenting, they're feeling a lot more confident about answering the tough questions that young kids are nowadays asking. So I feel those are little affirmations that we can create as corporates with our employee base, with the stories that we tell, with just the way we behave internally and externally. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does. Yeah. Thank you so much, Archana.
So let me start with, when I saw KASHISH Film Festival, the theme this time is Be Fluid, Be You. This year, actually we closed the year, but last year when we started our year and a lot of work around future of work was happening in a lot of corporates, we said, how do people relate to it? Forget gender, forget which community do they belong to. As people of our organization, what is it that they should relate to? We launched something called as You Be You. We just said, you be you. And that went so powerful. That went so powerful because it came back to the point that you were talking. At the end of the day, who is that wholesome person that you're getting to work and workplace is all that matters to us. The second thing that comes to my mind is, when we started on this formal journey of diversity and inclusion, which is about 5 years ago, But our organization is a 150 years old legacy, US MNC. We said, what are our focus areas? It's very easy to, talk about women equality and women, focus initiatives. So we also went there. We said we'll have men and women. That is one of our focus area. We said LGBTQ plus is our second focus area. And our third and fourth focus area is mental wellness and health. And fourth is personality types. Now, this cuts across every diversity, if that's the word we want to use, or difference that we want to think of. But as an organization, as a workplace, as an ecosystem that we are trying to build for people, for livelihoods and, of course, earning profits, is about, how do we make sure that it's coming to life. And, you spoke about kids. I have a 7-year-old. And, I just had to explain to her, where am I going? And it was so easy for me to do it because she has been listening around it for so many years now. I talk to her. It's just easy for me because that's conscious inclusion, if you ask me. If I can't do that, I can't go to my podium in the organization and talk to people and talk about trainings and everything. But another affirmation which strangely works, I feel, is classroom trainings. It really works. I don't know how, but it works. When you talk about unconscious bias and when you talk about allyship, yeah, these are all jargons and everything, but these are real things. So how do we make sure that people are staying away and they realize their conditioning as they are in a situation? I think it's okay to say sorry, but it's not okay to say something and just let it be. Right? So I think these are some of the things that clicked my mind when you spoke about those things from our organization and personal space perspective.
Thank you for being
Thank
the
you.
thoughtful parent that you are.
So we have this session called microaggressions, right? Small things, big impact. How anything you may say could potentially be seen as offensive by someone. So when you said micro-affirmations, it took me a minute to even wrap my head around it. And then I realized we do have also a session called colorful language. And colorful language talks about what the L stands for, what the G stands for, the difference between gender, sexuality. Many people in this room may know it, but many people don't get the difference. They don't understand what it means. The whole community is bundled either into one, or people pretend it doesn't exist. So we have a session that's not just talking about discrimination, but also about, we know these can be terms which change. The acronym keeps getting longer and longer. We just put a plus at the end of it now. But the point is, it's an ever-evolving world, and our session called Colorful Language is just no judgment. Come here, let's talk about what it means, ask questions. So that's one. And the other one is my favorite story to tell. So if someone's heard this before, I apologize in advance. When we started our inclusion journey in India, specifically, which was about 12 years ago, again, we did the same thing. What should we focus on? LGBTQ, no judgment again. I'm requesting for no judgment. When I asked this question, people were like, how many people would identify? It's not important. Then 377 was very much in favor, and then not, and then, you know the whole dance that happened there. So we decided about maybe 10 years ago to have something called this ERG group, Employee Networks and Committees Fair, where each of the networks had a bit of a stall. So the Women's Business Alliance had a stall where we talked about what the WBA did. The Family Network had a stall, the Events Committee, the Environment Committee, and we had a small little stall for LGBT Pride and Allies. And trust me, there was one person manning the stall, yours truly, because we didn't have any employee that was out at that time. And it was a stall. I borrowed a pride flag, and I sat there. And most people didn't come to the stall. People who came to the stall asked me what it is about, walked away. Out of the maybe 100 of people that were at that fair, 1 or 2 maybe took the booklet, right? We had the same event last year. Actually, as a matter of fact, this is the time we have it. And we have volunteers that we cannot stop from manning that stall, number one. And also, the other micro affirmation that came out of that is we printed something called an ally card, which you can keep on your desk, so people know that you are an ally. You are coming out as an ally. And when I did that, I had the first person come out to me. And of course, I have the DNI tag, so people think of me as a natural safe space. And with the years, people would come out to me. The gloriousness of that was, they would say, I'm not out to my family, I'm not out to society, but this is a place I feel safe and I'm out here. So that was fabulous. I thought that was a big win for us. Not only were they now out to me, they are out on panels, they are out talking to audiences like this about their experience. And today, now I can't give you the number, but suffice to say, it is in the hundreds of people that have disclosed to us that they are part of the community. So micro affirmations do make a difference.
You should tell that story everywhere you go, irrespective of whether people have heard it or not. It's such a warm, fuzzy feeling to listen to this. And with that, I'm going to come to the last question, and it's just basically, get response. And I'm going to start with you, Minal, because I was just thinking that all of us, as I said, are culture custodians of the organization and also the kind of work that we do. And I feel that all of us has within us both a role and a responsibility of furthering inclusion. How would you define that role to be for you?
I think more than the role, I'm just thinking it's more of a responsibility. If I want to be treated in a particular way, I need to learn to treat the other person also the same way. I think that is a responsibility as a culture custodian that all of us, I'm sure, hold. And if that is not there, I just realized that I can say we make the food that world loves as an organization, and if I can't be providing happiness to people by letting them be, I really don't know whether that food on the table is really giving them happiness. So more than the role, I would just think of the responsibility to treat people with respect, to treat people with the same love, the same care that I would want for myself from anybody, from everywhere and every part of my life. That's a short one for you.
I think for me, I've always wanted to create impact with whatever I've always done, right? You could call it ambitious, you could call it whichever way, but I like to believe that I've left some impact, some legacy. I feel grateful that I have this opportunity at my organization to be, the culture custodian. It is always around being respectful, it's about providing the right vocabulary, it's about making sure you're giving the right messages internally and externally. And the password on my computer says doing what I love. And that's an affirmation for me, actually.
Totally.
So I'm truly grateful. I'm supported by a team that also feels that same passion in everything that we do, and it's really the wind beneath my wings then, about putting work out that is meaningful. It's not just check the box activities for us.
So I think at our firm and this is a slightly nuanced topic. In the field of HR and diversity and inclusion, identity politics can be quite interesting. I am a working mother. I am a minority in and of itself. So naturally people assume I do this work because I want to support working mothers, which I do. But that is not all that I'm supporting. So the thing that we try to do when we are being inclusive is have a working mother speak on an LGBTQ panel, have a male business leader speak on a women empowerment panel, It's very, very conscious. And the point to make here is, sure, I identify with some minority, but I understand what it takes to include someone else. Because all of us know what it means to be excluded in some way, but to also cross-identify, I think really is the power of inclusion. So that's some of the things we consciously do, and I consciously do as well.
Thank you. I have a surprise question though for you, which I did not include in the brief, but someone asked me this question on the way to this event, and I thought is an interesting question. A lot of time when we talk about diversity and inclusion, and then we talk about our products, services, whatever our organizations offer. And there are times they say, when you all talk about diversity and inclusion, but your products and services are not, what is it that you would like to perhaps advise on this thing? Because I think when we are faced with this double whammy at times, as the organization goes to a maturity curve, okay, you've done what you wanted to do, or at least started the process of kept the ball rolling internally. How do you then pan it off to say, like, Kashish is a great example, enhancing your corporate citizenship footprint to add value to the magic being created by these wonderful folks out here. So your money is going into the right place. So your commitment is, we come back again next year and support, including my own organization, if I'm still there with them, but just in terms of, because this is a question that came up to me, like for example, I remember talking on a panel with Uber, and they say, you all talk about this diversity and inclusion, the moment one of your driving partners sees a trans person or a person who is differently dressed or differently able, they just cancel the ride and go. Or, like for me, one of the favorite questions is that you talk about inclusivity and diversity, but what about your own products and brands? Are they inclusive in their language? Are they inclusive in their branding? Do they cover this, do they cover a wide range of audience? So how do we react as culture custodians? How does one work? So this is just a question, but very quick thoughts from you in terms of, because we have got such an engaged and such an empowered audience who would actually want to know that if LGBT content or product and services for the community, not only hiring them or doing sensitization product, but how does one then work with them in order to create a better space?
Okay, something
Yes.
comes to my mind, not necessarily from just LGBTQ plus community, but just diversity angle and inclusion. So I think by now I have told you all many times that I work for a food company. One of our excuse me, one of our products is called as Betty Crocker, and they are cake mixes. And now we are across the world. There are some brands that operate in India, some brands operate in Middle East, and so on and so forth. Cake mixes as a product was advertised in Middle East with primarily women, trying to bake. There was a very big campaign on this, and you may all, probably some of you may have also seen that online. And a child basically wrote to us as an organization stating, I like baking, and everything that you have written on the labeling, on the packet, kind of indicates that only women can make this. I like to do it, so can you make it more inclusive? We actually went back to our consumers. We said, of course, that's a blind spot. Like I said, say sorry, but correct it. And we made the changes. I think that's one of the examples that I took away, and a lot of us took away in our organization, to stand for inclusion, and just not for a particular community or just not for a particular minority group, but really think about that. And coming to Kashish, I just realized that food gives happiness and films gives happiness. So I think we are making those little steps and our contributions.
Avril, Archana, would you have a quick rejoinder to this?
Mine is a boring answer, but it talks about the changing world. So A lot, see, now we are in the business of money. Is the most inclusive thing on the world. Everybody uses it and everybody complains about it. But I think what's important for everyone to know is companies like ours, and actually all of our public limited companies, are held to a very, very high standard by shareholders. And while it was always about profitability, how are you making my money, the questions today shareholders are asking us is, what are you doing about climate change? Right? What are you doing about the changing society? How are you supporting legislation which is more inclusive? It's called the ESG world, environment, social, and governance world. And you cannot exist in the world today without having focus on these things. So it's almost like, and I don't want to say you don't have a choice, but the world holds you accountable to be a good corporate citizen. Shareholders will not invest in companies that support fossil fuels. Shareholders will not invest in companies that are discriminatory. It's a changing world. And most importantly, employees. People complain about Gen Z, but may I just say, Gen Z is the most inclusive generation we have seen ever. And they care. They care about your carbon footprint. They care about how inclusive you are. You cannot exist in the world without, I mean, you can't do business without being inclusive and without being socially responsible. So I like this changing world that we are in right now.
Thank you. Definitely want to add to the fact that employees, even when they look to join organizations, they are looking to see what are your policies, how inclusive are you. One thing that we hold to ourselves is, and this is interesting, but our business performance at the end of every year actually has, I'm using again an HR word, goal, which is on diversity. And whether it's on representation or culture or community, we're actually held to that, and a part of our rewards comes from the global organization basis how have we done in this space. India's doing very well, touch wood for that. And we're truly making meaningful steps to make sure that we're staying honest and true to what we want to do. From the content space, and I was waiting for this question to come my way for sure, sometimes we do make mistakes. The thing to do is to acknowledge it, accept it, and correct it. And that is what we're doing as we're moving along. We do make mistakes, but we still move on. We apologize and we move on, make sure we're correcting it and not repeating it again. So from that perspective, I think in this ever-changing world, we're keeping in step with it.
Thank you. In looking at the time, I'm not going to open it up for questions, but thank you, Archana, Minal, and Avril, for this wonderful discussion, thought-provoking and yet honest, inclusive, yet talking about the differences between us. And thank you for this wonderful audience. But I must say, thank you for this panel sponsor, Morgan Stanley, and for all of you who made time on a hot, warm Thursday afternoon to come and join us in this panel. Sridhar and the entire team at KASHISH, and including my wonderful facilitator, Juhi, who did this job of making sure they whipped me to come and accept this very panel, which I declined a day ago because I was supposed to attend another meeting. But thank you for being persuasive. I think being persuasive can really change the world. Hopefully, we will see you all as partners, including new ones, in the next edition of KASHISH. But thank you all.
Thanks for the opportunity. I've been enjoying myself. Thank you.
I would like to felicitate all our panelists and our moderator as well. A big round of applause for Avril, for Zainab, for Minal, and for Archana ji. Superb. Thank you, each one of you. We had a beautiful exchange of ideas here. Yeah, sure.